Hey, you've made it to the podcast Recovery Captured, hosted by me, Shannon Louise, a certified recovery coach and self-verified addict. Join me on my journey through my recovery from mind-altering substances, eating disorders, depression, and much, much more. During this podcast, you'll hear my personal experience, thoughts, and opinions, as well as my guests' stories through their own recovery. I hope that you're able to take something away from this podcast and use it as a tool to help you see that your story is picture perfect. So, welcome, Mike Scott. I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, you know the drill. We got some goods that we need to talk about. Okay, so that is, what are you in recovery for? What is your recovery date? And give us a fun fact about you.
Yeah, so I'm in recovery for everything, I would say. Alcohol was the one that finally took me down, but there wasn't a drug that I found that I didn't enjoy excessively, like mental health stuff too. I mean, depression, anxiety, PTSD, all that good stuff, self-harm, all that whole basket of fun stuff. My recovery date I count as like the last time I took any drug or alcohol. So that was in March 6th. 2017. But like before that, like marijuana was back in 2010 and self-harm was like 2008 or 9, but I count the last one. Besides, I don't want to be an old timer yet.
And okay, so we got how long you've been in recovery. And so what is a fun fact about you?
Fun fact about me. So I used to work as a veterinary technician. My wife's a veterinarian. So we find ourselves getting a lot of our house is like the misfit toy island, but for dogs and cats. Like all of our animals are stuff that she saves from work or I save from work. So we had our most recent one, we have a 6-month-old pug who was signed over to my wife because he was born with both sexual parts. So he had both of them and testicles, but he peed like a girl and he had a useless penis that just hung there and nothing did with it. So we got him and he had to get surgically corrected and all that fun stuff. So yeah, not many people have a hermaphrodite animal goes into.
Well, let him choose his own gender. I like it.
Yeah, we're letting him choose his pronouns.
And what's his name?
His name is Mogwai.
Mogwai?
Mogwai. So from the Gremlins.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
And you said you have 3 other dogs?
Yeah. Yep. So we have a rescue mastiff that's about almost 2 years old. She had terrible knees and was dragging her butt around and couldn't really stand up. So my wife ended up doing some knee surgeries on her and just giving her her best life she can have. And then we got a lab and a old Boston Terrier.
Nice. What are their names?
Dory, Nala, and Xena.
What great names. I love it.
Yeah.
You're like Noah's Ark.
Yeah, pretty much. Plus, we got 2 cats. We have a fish. We just got a bunny rabbit. We just drove and got a bunny rabbit last weekend for my oldest, who we named that one Geralt. So if anybody there watches The Witcher or anything, we named him after that because my 5-year-old son wanted a monster killer for a bunny because this one was going to stay in his room and protect him from nightmares. So we came up with that name. Yeah. Plus 3 kids, a wife. Like, yeah. We're ready to go.
You got it all. Anyways, now that we have a common agreement that animals are amazing, give us a little background. Okay, so let's get into your story. What was it like before drugs, alcohol, depression, the self-mutilation? What the fuck happened? How you got sober and how you are where you are today. And let's talk about you as a recovery coach, because as many of you guys know, I'm also a recovery coach and I like to talk to my fellow peers about it. So why don't you jump in with your story, okay?
Yeah, definitely. So my story, it's interesting. Not so much. I'm what's called like a higher bottom. Like I didn't lose. Like I never spent a night in jail. I didn't. My wife stuck with me through it, and we're still married and all that stuff. Um, but like I had a lot of looking back now, like a lot of traumas growing up. Like when I was 2 years old, like my very first memory I've ever can remember, as far back as I go, is me going to the high school swimming pool, falling in the water and looking up, drowning. Like I remember drowning. Like I used to have nightmares about this shit all the time. I haven't had one since I was sober, but literally like drowning, looking up at the water, remembering that my dad told me if I kick, I can swim, and that's how you swim is you kick. And I just kick in, and could never reach the surface. And then I blacked out. And next thing I know is I woke up and there was a lifeguard like giving me mouth to mouth on the side of the pool at 2 years old. Um, like my very first memory. And then like I'm the oldest of three boys. We grew up in Michigan, middle class. Like, there was nothing that my dad, when I was growing up, before my brothers were around, he worked a lot. So he wasn't really home. He would be home like for a weekend and then gone for 2 weeks, home for a weekend type of thing. So it was really like my mom and they were younger parents. I think my mom was 20 or something, and my dad was like 23. And we never really, we had a house, we had food, we had all this stuff. We might not have the best cars and everything, but we had what we needed. And you know, something from my earliest age, I just remember almost like a light switch. I remember something clicked like in my fifth grade, just all of a sudden. Like before that, I felt everything was good, everything was good. And then when I hit fifth grade, I don't know if something happened or what, or mentally blocking. Like I've worked through therapy trying to figure out what the fuck happened that made this light switch go off. But all of a sudden, like something switched when I was in fifth grade, and it was just like, boom, like I don't feel right. I just don't feel like I'm like my inside doesn't match my outsides. My insides wouldn't match what's going on the outside. Like I just didn't feel anything. Like I just felt lost. And that just started like right in fifth grade, and then carry that in high school. Like those middle school, you break up with your girlfriends, and that's like the worst thing in the world and all this. But like for me, it felt like the world was ending, and like it would get like really dark, and I never had like an outlet. And that's kind of when like the self-harm stuff kicked in, and nobody really knew what to do. I'm sure someone knew what to do, but it was kind of more pushed under the rug. Like I went to therapy once and that was it. And then I got put on medications, antidepressants and things like that. And that worked for the most part. And you know, I would drink occasionally in high school. I wasn't that big partier. Like I wasn't at a party every weekend. I was really big into sports. Michigan football is a big one, and track were the only two that I really did. I was decent, talks about playing in college, smaller colleges, nothing, no big universities, but smaller colleges. And my senior year, I ended up really messing up my shoulder. And then track season that year, I tore my calf. And after that, it was just like, you know, the bottom kind of fell out on me. So I didn't have to stay not drinking because I was worried about a scholarship or worried about, being in shape for the next meet or the next game. So I could start. And I remember the first time I smoked pot was in my mom and dad's basement on graduation night. I traded one of my friends, three of my parents' stolen Coors Lights for one joint. And yeah, that was it. Like that was the start of it. Like I finally found something that I could shut that voice off inside that told me I wasn't enough and that I wasn't what I was supposed to be, and I could just shut it off. And I just kind of hit the ground running. Like I would work most of the time. I did a lot of colleges. I went to a lot of colleges. Um, Never graduated with a degree, but I went to a lot of colleges, and I last a semester or two. But then, like the drinking or the drugs or whatever, the girl, whatever it was that got me out of myself was what I ended up gravitating towards. And the schoolwork would fall off, all that stuff. Now I went when I went to college, we didn't have where we're on our parents' insurance and stuff. This is kind of a shitty thing, but I probably will get. Hopefully, there's no insurance fraud. Maybe the statute of limitations, but you used to have to be a full time student to stay on my dad's insurance until I was like 24 or something. So me being smart, alcoholic, manipulative person, I'd sign up for full time classes, print off that transcript that said, look, these are the classes I'm taking, and then drop them because I knew I wasn't going to go to them, but I was on insurance for the rest of the year. So I didn't have to worry about, if I had an issue or anything like that.
Smart. It's smart.
It is like, I wanted to be covered because I did a lot of stupid shit, like drinking and driving and all that stuff. Like I wanted to be covered, at least if I got hurt. I used to, something that I used to do in college was, so I drove a stick shift, and my buddy and I, we would always drink and drive. Like it was just like every weekend, like that was just something we did. We party somewhere and then just have to get home because we were good kids. We had to be home by our curfew type thing, regardless if we couldn't drive. But I remember we came up with this idea that if we're both half drunk, we're both half sober. So if we tag team driving and we drive together, that drunk person's in the back seat passed out sleeping. The two sober people are driving. So whoever was in the driver's seat took care of shifting and the pedals, and whoever was in the passenger seat was in charge of the wheel and making sure we stayed in between the lines.
It sounds so unsafe.
But we thought that was the best way instead of just one person. Like if we're going down for DUI, we're going down together. Like, oh man, it was thinking back, like that was my best thinking. Like that was how hey, let's call for a ride, or hey, my parents would be cool if I just stay here and tell them I'm drinking. Like they were cool. Like, yeah, they weren't gonna, send me away or anything. But no, yeah, just insanity of that.
And that's where your best thinking brought you, and now you're here.
Yeah. And then, so I just kind of wallowed in all that stuff and just kind of drank my way through my 20s, like never really having a solid, goal, nothing really pointed. It was literally just work enough to drink enough. Housing wise, like I would stay with some friends. My grandfather passed away, like I say suddenly. He was 80, but like the day before we were all talking to him, planning about everything, and then he just didn't wake up like that next day. Like he just died in his sleep. So suddenly for us, but 80 years, not really that suddenly, but like my grandma never lived by herself. Like they were always together. And so I moved in with my grandma and got to, take care of her. And I lived with her for 2 years, I believe, almost 3 years. And those were some of the best times. Like the old adage of, my best day in recovery is better than my worst day drinking, or, I never had any fun drinking, all that stuff. Like I still had some good times and I made some good memories. Because even in active addiction, I wasn't at that bottom barrel. It's like that roller coaster where, you're good for a little bit and then you hit the bottom and then you build your way back up and then you hit the bottom again. And like those 2 years living with my grandma, those are memories that like no one else in my family gets to get, of sitting and having dinner with her 5 nights a week, regardless if I was, drunk maybe 3 of those nights or 1 of those nights. Like I still got those memories of being in that house and being there and, taking her to her doctor's appointments, taking her, going out to dinner, doing all that shit. So that when that happened was when I started getting the woe is me attitude towards it. Like instead of looking at it as like I do now, the positive, like, and that thing is, why do I have to do this? Why am I stuck doing this? I could be doing this instead. Like really, I wasn't going to be in college. I wasn't going to be doing anything. But my thinking then was, I could be doing this, but no, I have to take her to a doctor appointment, this and that. So that was my rationality for drinking and drinking heavily. And I just kind of rolled with it. My wife, I've my wife and I started dating in 2010, and that's she was big like anti-pot. She came from a strong family, like no addiction, no drinking, like nothing like that. Um, so when we got together, she's like, I just don't want you smoking pot. Like the drinking's okay, but she's had boyfriends that did it in the past and blah blah blah. So I literally just was like, fine, done. Like not gonna smoke pot anymore. Didn't have to go to didn't have to go to therapy, didn't have to go to rehab, like nothing like that. Just put it down and I was done. And so we dated, we known each other for a while. Her brother was a friend of mine in high school and things like that. She ended up getting a job out in Pennsylvania. So we moved out to Pennsylvania and we were out in Pennsylvania for about 7 years. And this is where like my isolationism took. Um, so prior to Pennsylvania, I worked in emergency rooms. I worked on ambulances. Like I worked like in the field as ER, CAT scan, like all that stuff in the field. I saw a lot of dead bodies, a lot of trauma, a lot of this. And drinking was always like, hey, this is what you do to get through the day type of a thing. I never saw it as an issue. I saw it as, of course, like I wheeled 4 bodies down to the morgue tonight. It's 7 a.m. I'm going to the bar that opens at 7 and I'm going to drink until 11 and then go home type of thing. That's how I decompress. Never saw it as an issue. It wasn't until that move to Pennsylvania where wasn't working those jobs anymore. I wasn't working for the first 6 months out there, and the drinking picked up. Like it wasn't just at the end of a shift because I wasn't working a shift. It was, oh well, I'm up right now. Like it's 8 o'clock. She's at work. Let's get drunk now. I can sleep it off by the time she gets home at 6 o'clock. So if I start drinking at 8, quit by 2, I can take a nap until about 5:30, get up, throw some shit around the house and make it look like I did something. And then, hey, honey, you're home. Welcome home. Want to have a drink? Here, let me mix you a drink, and then mix myself another one and then start off again. And that's when it really started to like steamroll into daily morning drinking for, I mean, really now looking at it, there's really no reason to drink because I could do it without, but like no actual reason, no justification, no bad day at work, no nothing. It was just the sun was up, I was awake, or I was breathing. Let's drink. Like that was literally the only justification I needed. And
did your wife have any clue through this whole transition? Like
she's not so much when we would have arguments over it and stuff, and I would just kind of push it under the rug. Like I come from a big Irish background where we don't talk about problems. We just like, hey, under the rug. And my wife's like, nope, fuck that. We live in hardwood. We don't have rugs. Like, you better get this shit out. We're not dealing with it. Like, so we had some arguments and stuff, and it wasn't until a little bit later on. So we got married in 2013, and then we were moved out in Pennsylvania in 2013, got married, and then in 2015-ish, we bought a house, all that stuff, and she got pregnant with our first kid. And I remember like my justification and our deal was, when you get pregnant, I won't drink because you won't drink for that 9 months. Like we'll be good. I don't want to, that was like our goal type of a thing. I didn't even make it a fucking day. Like she told me she was pregnant and I think I was mixing a drink downstairs. And that whole, so 15, 16 and the first part of 17 was where it, like that bottom came and I wasn't getting back up. So when we moved out there, I got a job, working with her. She came in and she's like, hey, we need help at the office. One day she works with animals. She's a veterinarian. I was like, well, I've done IVs on people. How hard is it going to be on an animal? Like, I know where the heart is. I can figure out all this shit. So I went in and helped out one day. And that's what I did. Like was a veterinary technician for a decade from moving on from there, and almost a decade. And she would start to see not only me at home, like when I get home, I would drink, but like how it would be at the end, the shakes in the morning. Mondays were the worst. Mondays were like a Sunday. Like I if I made one Monday a month working, I was good. Just because like you go on such a bender from Friday until Sunday at 3, like Mondays were, even if I stopped drinking a Sunday at 3, I was probably still drunk by the time I had to get up and go to work. So like I had to go through all that shit. So she knew. We did, when she got pregnant, that didn't last. That was when she started to get more upfront about it. Like she'd be like, okay, well, look, you can have a bottle here, but don't do this. Like, don't drink more than this much over the weekend, type of a thing. So then I was, taking that bottle, emptying the vodka out, putting the vodka in a water bottle, putting the water bottle in the back of the fridge behind all the other bottles of water, hoping that she didn't grab the one that was full of vodka to take to work with her, and then filling the vodka bottle up with water, and then adding hand sanitizer into it so it smelled like alcohol if she went to sniff it. And that way I could drink as much as I want to without the bottle looking like anything was gone. Like all that hiding shit used to go in in the 12-step big book thing. They talk about like in the back of the toilet. Like I used to hide bottles in the back of the toilet because you could seal them and hide them back there. I was getting really bad at hiding. We lived in Pennsylvania. We lived towards the Poconos in the mountains, and we got a really nasty snowstorm. And I remember running out of alcohol for like 3 days, and it was the worst 3 days of my life. Once that snow stopped, I went and bought 2 handles, and I bought a brand new gallon gasoline can, and I poured 2 handles of vodka into a gasoline can and put it out in the shed because that was my backup. Like if we got snowed in again, I was at least going to have a gallon of vodka that I could use. Yeah, it was bad. I would hide bottles out. We had a fireplace that we used to keep warm because out there it was all oil and that was expensive. So we had a lot of wood that we'd have stacked out back. And I hid bottles in the wood so that, I got to go out and get more wood. And I down half a fifth real quick, go back in and still be nursing that same beer type of a thing. It just got really bad.
Yeah, it's the lengths that we go to protect our addiction. The lies we'll tell, we do anything and everything to continue on that path, just so no one takes it away from us. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I kept doing it. So her entire pregnancy, I kept doing it. The baby was born. I was there. I remember everything. I wasn't drunk in the delivery room. I was there. I got to be present for all that stuff. But my thinking was like, once this baby comes, like I'll be cured. Like I won't want to drink anymore because I'll have something else to take care of. Like it won't be about me anymore. But that didn't happen. Like if anything, like I would just start drinking more. And babies were amazing because they nap so much. So they were like a built-in like alarm clock. So I could make it look like I was the good dad because I would be like, oh, the baby's up at 3 a.m. I'm going to get up and go feed him a bottle. You take a sleep, I would tell her, you go ahead and sleep. I'll get this one. While I'm feeding him a bottle, I'm mixing 3 or 4 drinks at 3 a.m. because why not? I'm up and technically, it's still nighttime. Bars are still open. So it's not like I'm drinking in the morning. But then, then I pass out or gracefully fall asleep after the baby's done, after I'm done with my bottle, fall asleep. And then the baby wakes up again at 8 o'clock. And then she gets up, does that one. And then I would just keep drinking. Like I would just sporadically keep drinking throughout the day. Never, I'm very lucky, like never almost burnt a house down or hurt anybody or hurt my kid or jeopardized my kid or anything like that. But in March, like in the end of February, coming up in 2017, it was starting to get really bad. Like my wife and I, we did like a 1.5 years of marriage counseling, thinking that maybe there was something else going on. And I remember my wife would always show, like, she'd come in with like a bottle that I forgot and I hid like in her shoebox because I'm a fucking idiot. And why wouldn't I just hide it in my own shoebox? I have to put it in my wife's shoebox where she's gonna fucking look. Like, but the therapist never mentioned anything about like treatment or anything. And it just kept going and going. And that March, so my recovery date's March 6th. So that was the day that I woke up. And that was the first day I didn't have anything in my system. So March 5th was the last day that I drank. And it was a weekend bender, just my normal going through everything. But for some reason, I remember my wife had to explain to me what happened. Like I woke up on the 6th, like what went downstairs, and like all the tables are pushed over, the counters are moved. I'm like, what the fuck happened last night? And she's like, you don't remember anything? I was like, no, I don't remember a thing. And she had fallen down the stairs holding our baby and she slipped down. Nobody was hurt or anything. But I guess I walked over and I was super attentive and wanted to be there and wanted to make sure everything was okay in my drunken blackout, which I don't remember. And something about that scared the shit out of me about something that could happen to them, and I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I wouldn't have remembered doing anything. Like, what could I have done in that blackout? Like, if they needed an ambulance or they needed a ride somewhere, like I couldn't even found my phone probably to call 911 or remember. Like I was just gone. And that morning on the 6th, it was a Monday, and I remember I told my wife, I was like, I'm just gonna stay home. I gotta stay home. Like this, blah, anxiety, depression, whatever I used as my hangover excuse for that day. And I sat home and just thought and thought and thought, and like finally confronted what I was and how much I was doing and what I was. And she came home that night. We weren't talking, didn't talk, anything like that. Went to bed, and then on the 7th, first thing I did before I even got out of bed was I grabbed my phone, and because I didn't drink that whole day before, and I was like, this is cool, like I can do that. But the 7th, I woke up and I was like, man, I'm getting out of this house. I'm going to find a drink. Like I needed something to drink on that day. And I picked up my phone, and instead of going out the door and stealing money, by this time my wife was locking up all the extra cash, locking up all of our cards. Like I couldn't be trusted with anything. Like I was breaking into like our little safes just to steal $5 so I can get a fifth of the cheapest vodka out there. And instead of running and doing that, I Googled help with alcohol near me, and I found a treatment center. I called them before 7 o'clock that morning, and my wife and my kid dropped me off at 11 that day. And that's where it started. Like that's where it was the hardest decision I've ever made. My kid wasn't even a year old yet. I had no clue what rehab was. I had no clue what AA was. I had no clue what any recovery. I had zero, like nothing. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I thought I was going to go there for a few, like 5 days. They'll help me get me some meds that'll make me feel high, make me feel good, so I can continue to do what I was doing. And I remember doing my intake with the nurse and talking about it. And then I come out of the intake room, and my wife was sitting on a couch with our baby, who was like 11 months old. And she's just crying and crying and crying and like just bawling. And I'm like, what's wrong? Like, I need to do this. Like, I don't get, like, I understand this is hard, but I thought this is what we needed, type of thing. She's like, no, you don't get it. You're going to be here for at least 28 days. And I was like, that's nothing compared to what I've done, the last 10 years or so. She's like, no, you're going to miss his birthday. Like our son's birthday, like it was coming up at the end of March, and I'm going to miss it because I'm going in the treatment. And I missed like my little brother's wedding. I missed all this stuff in treatment. But I had to do it. Like, I think that was my beaten down moment where I would do anything to recovery, because when she said that, the thought didn't even cross my mind to walk out the doors. Like, I was just like, no, I have to stay. If I don't stay for this, I told her, I'm going to miss every single birthday after this. I'd rather miss the first one. We can take pictures when I get out and pretend it's the first one, and he's never going to know. Like, he's one. He's not going to know shit if we took the pictures on his birthday or not. But he's going to remember his 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th birthday. And if I don't do this, there's no way I'm going to be alive or anywhere near his life to be in any pictures for that. And that's kind of where my recovery started. And treatment, it was amazing. It's the only one I've done so far, so maybe I just got lucky and got the first good one. But the people there were extremely caring. It was a small, almost, if you want to call it, a family run. Like, everybody that was there was in recovery. Like the VP, the CEO, out of the therapists, I think there was only one that did not go through there for rehab eventually. All the techs went through there. Like everybody went through there, and it was extremely welcoming. And I remember there was one time where I got off my detox meds and I wanted to leave. Like, you get the fight or flight mode once you start to get cleaned out. And my thing is I always flight, like just go, fight when I get back into a corner. If I don't go. And I remember I talked to one of the counselors there. She was amazing. She wasn't even my counselor. She was just someone I would talk to at the smoking circles and stuff. And I said, I'm thinking about leaving. Like, what do I do? She's like, well, come back and talk to me. So we ended up calling my wife, and like, I got all cryy and tried to play the emotional role and wanting to go. And Anne was the counselor's name. And she goes, it's completely up to you two if he goes or not, but he's just off of his meds. He's just starting to feel right now. Him leaving right now would be the worst thing. And I remember my wife said, you committed to this. I'm not coming to get you. You are staying. And then she hung up, and that was it. And then I was like, well, fuck it. I'm not walking out. Like, it's March in Pennsylvania. Like, we're on top of a mountain. It's fucking cold. I'm not making it anywhere. So I stuck it out, and I took everything I could from that program. And the way that it ended up working out, man, my insurance cut out after 14 days. So it was, no, my insurance actually cut out after 10 days, and then they didn't want to pay anymore. My counselor went to bat for me with the CEO and everybody, saying like, he's just not ready. He's getting there. They ended up paying for me to stay an extra week, and I got out 2 days before my first kid's birthday. So I got to be home for the birthday. I got to do all that stuff. But treatments are great for people. Like I tell people I work with all the time, like, treatment's great. Like, you get away from something, you're in a safe place for as much as you need. Real shit happens when you walk out that door. That day you leave, you have a choice to make. And the day I left, you get discharged, you can leave at 7 a.m. Sundays were family days. So your families could come up and go to different groups with you. And they did like different family counseling and stuff. So Sunday, my wife came up at 8 o'clock. We stayed until 3:30 that day. Like, we could have left at any time. We stayed until 3:30, drove the hour and a half home. So we got home around 5. I hugged my kid. I said, I love you. I was out the door at 5:30 and went to my first meeting. Like, that's what I had to do. Went to my first meeting, stood up at the meeting and said, I have no fucking clue who you people are, what to do. I just got out of treatment. They told me to come here. What's next? And some guy handed me a 24-hour coin and said, here's a list of numbers, call somebody on it tomorrow and we'll tell you what's next. And I did that, and I kept doing that. They told me to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I did 89 in 90 days. The one I missed was somewhere in the middle, like around 60 or so. We found out my wife was pregnant, like rehab baby. What do you do when you get out of rehab? Boom, you go right to town. Like, yeah, like what else do you do? Find out she's pregnant and stuff. So we're at work one day and she's like, man, I just don't feel good. She's feeling like dehydrated, this stuff. And I'm like, well, we'll go, like, let's go to the doctor. The doctor sends us to the emergency room. So we're in the emergency room. So I don't get to go to a meeting that day because we're in an emergency room till like 2 a.m. They do an ultrasound. They come back and be like, the fetus heart rate's only at 20. Looks like you're having a miscarriage, type of a thing. Like, so that was the meeting I missed because I was in the ER for a miscarriage. But this was before like pandemic. So we didn't have this cool Zoom, like 12-step stuff. We had chat rooms. So I Googled, 12-step chat room. And I just went on to this old school chat room and just typed out, I'm fucking struggling. My wife's having a miscarriage, blah, 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 blah. And I just got boom, 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 tons of responses. So I used that kind of like a chat room meeting so I don't call it, I still did 90 and 90, but one of them was only by text. So, I mean, pandemic wise, you can count that as a meeting, but I wasn't counting it back then.
It's definitely a meeting. Come on.
Yeah.
You gotta give yourself a little slack.
But like my whole life, I always struggled with God, higher power. Like my parents we made us go to church, made us like be ushers as kids and all this stuff and listening to all the, like, I never made a connection with anything. And even like in rehab, they're like, well, just pray, meditate, just get on your knees and just say, hey, don't let me drink today. And at the end of the day, say, hey, thank you for not letting me drink. Like, don't say it to anybody, don't use anything. So that's what I was doing. And that's what I just kept doing for those 60 days. And it wasn't until she had her miscarriage. We're by ourselves, so we're 12 hours away from any family. When we moved to Pennsylvania, it was just us, and then we had a kid, and it was just us three. No family, no support, like nothing around us. Everybody was still back in Michigan. And so we leave the ER. Next day we go to the doctor. They're like, well, you're gonna have to have the surgery, so we're gonna have to do surgery. So the next day we're going to surgery at the hospital out here, and still didn't have a higher power, nothing, couldn't find shit. So we're in this surgery. She's scheduled for like 8:00, and we get there, 6:00 pre, all this. They kept pushing us back because they needed an OR for this, or they needed an OR for this. Just kept pushing us back. Doctors kept changing. So there was, from a big OB group, they had multiple doctors, kept changing. Finally, it's like 4:00 in the afternoon, the fifth or sixth doctor we see comes in, says, hey, my name is so-and-so. I'm going to do your surgery. I know you've heard that before from 5 other people, but we're wheeling you in about 20 minutes. I have the room. It's getting done. And then this doctor looks over at me and he's like, do I know you from somewhere? And I was like, no, you don't know us from somewhere. I'm like, we're from Michigan. We're not from this area. Obviously, he's from Uganda. Like, I didn't go there in high school. I didn't do anything. Like, I was like, there's no way our paths have ever crossed. And he's like, well, where are you at in Michigan? Like, we're from in Michigan. And I told him, he's like, I did my internship in the ER down there. He's like, you used to have like really like, and when I was younger, I had curly hair down to my shoulders. He's like, you used to have really long hair and you worked up in CAT scan and stuff. And I was like, yes, I did. He's like, well, I'm so-and-so, like, I remember you. So this doctor, born in Uganda, found his way to the same hospital and was the 5th doctor to come in as me and my wife randomly in Pennsylvania, 12 hours from home. And he happened to work in the exact same emergency room that I worked in a decade before. And he remembered. And he saw like my wife was having such a hard time, like just emotionally. And he's like, just come with me. He's like, if anybody asks, you're my intern, just come with me. So I didn't have to stop at the doors when they say, okay, you can stop here and we'll come get you out in the waiting room. Like, I got to continue to hold her hand all the way into the OR until she was out. And then I got to stand outside the door and hold her hand and be the first one when she woke up to see, where usually it's the nurse or somebody else. Like, and that was when I realized, like, holy shit, like, there's no way that's a coincidence. Like, that had to be some type of, like, not divine intervention, because I'm not that cool to be divinely intervented on, but that has to be something like, here's your fucking sign, like, get right type of a thing. And ever since then, like, I haven't really struggled. Like, I still don't go to church. I still, like, during the pandemic, I tried to get super religious and like trying to read like all these, Jesus books and all these Buddhist books and all this stuff, like trying to find like this thing inside of me. Like, why do all these people go to church and come out smiling? Like, I always go to church and fucking count the number of studs that are on the walls, or I count how many windows are open. Like, why can't I get this? And like, I just had to realize, like, that's the same thing that happened in that thing. Like, I'm not supposed to get it. I just have to be to let it come through me. Like, I just have to be, as long as I don't put drink, drug, nothing in me. Like, I don't have to be that stand-up guy that's going to church every weekend and, doing all this and doing everything else. Like, I find my church is like in what I do for work now. Like, that's where I get that connection with a higher power, is seeing somebody come at me with 0 and going out the door and like with a plan and committing to the plan and seeing all that stuff. My wife and I, so here's a mind fuck for you. So we had one kid who completely normal. Like, my sperm was probably so drunk when we made this kid, like it probably was puking, like it didn't know where the fuck to go. So completely normal, happy boy. I get sober, 3 miscarriages in 8 months, or in 18 months. 4th one, we finally get a baby. So the 4th one, pregnancy after getting sober, she we were moving back to Michigan because after the third miscarriage, we were just like, we're done. Like, we're out here by ourselves. Neither of our parents are out here. We had no support. Like, it was getting stressful. But we had like the 12-step support. So after our miscarriages, people that didn't even, like, I've only seen them in meetings and stuff. Like, we had meals showing up on our porch, like, of people I didn't even know, like, their names and stuff. Like, we had people coming over and checking not only on me, but like coming and talking to her. And that first year of recovery, they did a workshop where you go out to a state park, they rent out like 50 different cabins, and you do a 4-day weekend, and you go through the steps, and that's what you do. And I did that, and that was the best time because my wife got to come, my son got to come, like, everybody was there. It was so cool. Like, I went from being on top of a mountain thinking I was alone and no one cared about me, to finding like this whole community of people. And then after that miscarriage and we decided to move back, we were leaving that whole community. So like, all of a sudden, like, I would start to get really nervous and things about coming back because I was leaving like my recovery circle. Like, I didn't know anybody in recovery back here in Michigan. I didn't know where the meetings were. I didn't know anything. And but we moved back. We got a house. We have 2 more kids now. Like, we just keep shooting them out now, and it's good. I haven't gone back full 12 steps since I moved home. Like, I like to mention this because, so we moved home in March of 19. We moved home to be closer to family. Like, specifically, I had one aunt that really raised me. Like, her kids, one was 2 years older than me and one was a year younger than me. So they were like my older brother and like my first sibling is how I saw them before my little brothers were born. Like, that was my first family. And she had gotten sick when we were out there. She had like a rare melanoma in her eye, and that was all getting taken care of. And then when we were moving back, it had went to her liver. So then she had liver cancer and stuff. So we were coming back to see her, and, we wanted to be around, and, thinking everything was going to be good. And then she passed away. Like, we came back in December. We moved back right before Christmas of 18, and she died March of 19. So like, just barely, like, we barely got back in time to just see her. And that was really hard because like, she was like that second mother figure to me. Like, I remember when I would be like really fucking up and shit, like in high school and stuff, and I wouldn't be able to, like, I wouldn't listen to my parents or something. She was the one that would like come down with like the boom and like scare the shit out of me. Or I remember I gave my car to a girl she didn't like once to borrow, and she went to that girl's place and where she was working and grabbed the keys and said, "You don't fucking touch his car anymore," and got out and drove my car and left her there. Like, that type of a person. So that was hard. We've lost that. And then, but I got to be there and I got to be present for that. So she got to die at home, surrounded by like her kids, her husband, everybody. And I got to be a part of that too, where, I just took care of like the night shift type of a thing. So like, I slept on the chair down there so that my uncle and my cousins could sleep because they were with her, helping her all day long and stuff. Like, I did the night shift type stuff. Whereas if she would have died like 5 years before, one, who knows if I would have made it back from Pennsylvania, and two, like, I would have been in that self-pity phase where I would have been like, woe is me, look what I'm losing. Like, of course I'm going to get wasted right now. Where instead it was, my whole mindset switched in recovery. It's not woe is me, it's what can I do to help somebody else, and that helps me. So I worked in the veterinary field, all that stuff. When I got out here, my wife and I continue to work together. Pandemic hit, and the pandemic hit right when I was finding a meeting out here that I was going to I would go every Saturday morning. And the pandemic hit in March, and I was so excited because I found, my goal was to find a home group so that I could get my 3-year coin at a home group, and then I would feel set and feel where I am. Fucking pandemic hit, all the meeting closed. I didn't get a 3-year coin. Like, no. But COVID for my recovery has been good. Like, I understand it's terrible. I'm not downplaying what COVID has done to so many people. For myself and my recovery, it opened up the doors. That 3-year coin, I ended up getting a 3-year coin from a 12-step meeting in Ireland that I attend. I try and attend it more. Usually I'm down to like once every 5 weeks or 6 weeks because it's in the middle of a day on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
But that beginning of COVID, I was in that meeting almost every week. And buddy of mine from Ireland who did not know him before COVID, we met through, so what got me through the first year of COVID was the Dopey podcast. There's a Facebook group, and podcast hit, and a few people were like, "Hey, let's do a Zoom where we can come in and just kind of talk about the podcast. Everybody's home, no one's doing shit," and that kind of morphed into meetings, like all recovery meetings of just people coming in and talking about their problems and stuff. And I kind of got in there on the ground floor a little bit. And I was like, hey, I'm going to take Friday and Saturday nights. I'm going to start a meeting on Friday and Saturday nights. So that's what I did. I started a Zoom meeting on Friday and Saturday nights. Friday nights, the first one I did was just like an open talk and stuff. And like 5 people showed up and it was kind of boring. And I was like, hey, no one's doing a speaker meeting. I got this whole Facebook group full of like 20,000 people that I can just post on there and get a speaker and have someone come in. And it's not going to be like a 12-step speaker. This is going to be like, I want to hear your war stories, but I also want to hear what you did to recover. And I want to hear all this stuff. Like, it was down and dirty, like, you know, what you hear at the smoker tables at a rehab, like
Right.
that type of stuff,
Right.
but with recovery. So your conversation didn't end when the cigarette was done. Like, you got to see the recovery in people. And I did that meeting. The first one I did was the first Friday in May. And I had a different speaker every single Friday up until I stepped back like in March of 2020, just because I needed some time, because it was getting to be too much. I was making like tons of Photoshop posts because I find comedy in recovery. So like I would be like, hey, send me something that you did that was embarrassing when you were drinking. And like I would make like just this terrible Photoshop poster of them. And that's what I used to post it and say who was coming up.
Yeah.
But I got tons of like semi famous type people, you know, like I was getting doctors, I was getting different podcast hosts were coming on. Like I was just reaching out and asking everybody. And that's what kept me sober. And that's where I found this guy in Ireland who was like, hey, come to my AA meeting. I think you'd be a great fit. And that's where I got my 3-year coin, because of going to like that 12-step meeting in Ireland. And since then I've gone to meetings on almost every continent. Like I've done Chinese, I've done a Russian meeting, I went to one in Germany, I've done a few in South America. Like Zoom opened this up, and it's great because I mean, the hardcore 12 steppers are going to tell me it's not great, but I can put it on my phone when I'm driving and I can listen to a whole meeting. Like I don't necessarily have to share in a meeting to get something from that meeting. Like I can listen to a meeting as I'm driving to work or something like that. And that just opened up the doors. Like even my 4-year coin. So when I got 4 years, I got that from a girl in North Carolina sent it to me because like her and I just hit off on Zoom and we talked, and she was just coming into recovery and didn't know what to do. And she went to a meeting and got me a 4-year coin and mailed it to me. Like Christmas time, I get more cards from random people from from that Facebook group than I do from family. Like that my whole wall was posted with cards from people from all over the world through that little group. And now they're doing like they do like up to 4 meetings a day, like some 25 meetings. They run marathon meetings for every holiday. Like they do all the stuff. I don't go as much anymore because I'm busy with work. So my recovery has changed a lot. So it was strict 12-step for 3 years, nothing but 12-step. Year 4 was kind of the year of me. So it was therapy. I got on some medications. I went through a year of trying different medication cocktails with psychiatry and to get my brain to feel kind of what my heart was feeling and connect those wires and stuff. Found what that was. And then, this past year 4 has been, I'm not going to say work because I don't use work like a meeting, but the people that I work with, So yes, and not only the people that I help, but like my coworkers.
Yeah.
So we have a very small group. We're all recovery coaches, which means we all have to be in recovery, and we meet every single Thursday from noon until 1 on our lunch break on Zoom, and we have our own meeting. So sometimes that meeting is about difficult cases that we're working on. Sometimes that meeting is about me, going, why did I go off on my wife last night because the dishes weren't done, or because, like, why did I go off on my kid because he was doing this, like, what's going on inside. Like, it's that self-check type of a meeting, what those 12-step meetings are, but without the 12 steps. It's just kind of that pure support, and that's kind of been what my last year has been. I still go to 12-step, not as much as I probably should, but things are just starting to open back up here, and it's just trying to figure out what meetings I want to go to and feel safe in. It's just different here.
So from the transition, doing 12-step for those so many years and now transitioning kind of out of it, do you feel like your recovery is at risk at any point?
No, not at all. The only thing so it's funny, I just had this conversation with my wife like a week or so ago because, she's changing jobs right now. So it was super stressful, and everything. And I looked at her and I was like, it's funny, like, with all this stress and stuff, like drinking or drugs, like none of that ever crosses my mind. Like, not once. What does cross my mind is, fuck, I want to go out for a pack of cigarettes. Like, I want to go smoke. Like, that's my craving still. Like, that's what I still get. I don't get the thing where I want to go out and buy a fifth. And I haven't gotten that probably since my first year. I think maybe once in my first year, but I haven't gotten that since then. And it's been like, I'm a big proponent of, I love the meetings. I love the 12-step meetings. I love going to them. I feel great. I go to them. So when I say I haven't gone as much as I should, I still go to them, but I don't go for myself. It's meeting a client there and introducing them to somebody. So I'm not going for my own recovery. I'm going to help somebody find their recovery type of a thing. I just went with a client who celebrated a year a month ago. Like, I just went with him to get his 1 year stuff and things like that. So I don't count that as me going to a meeting because it's not going for myself. And when you work in recovery, you have to make sure those lines. So I think that's why I hold that Ireland AA or 12-step meeting so close to my heart, because I'm not going to see somebody I'm working with at that meeting. I can be completely honest when I go there and say, hey, I'm working in recovery and I want to just bang my head up against a wall with some of these people. Sometimes I don't have to worry about those people that make me want to bang my head up against the wall sitting at the back of the meeting that I didn't see and then jeopardizing that. But no, I honestly, I don't think, I have not had any desire. I still do the things that I was told to do, like in the beginning. Every morning I say, hey, don't let me drink today. Like, that's all I say. I've switched to different readings. I do like the 24-hour-a-day book sometimes. Sometimes there's like this Daily Bread that comes out of Michigan. There's a bunch of different readings that I'll randomly pick up. But every day I do, the only thing that I can say I've done every single day is I remind myself I'm an alcoholic and I can't do it alone. So I just say, hey, don't let me drink today. I don't know if somebody's hearing it. I don't know, but I haven't drank yet. So I'm not into the questioning so much anymore.
Right. Well, what about those days that you kind of backtrack, whether it's backtracking in your recovery from drugs and alcohol or backtracking with the depression? What do you do to get back on track?
Walk. I do a lot of walking. So I can feel myself. I become in tune with therapy, like with going back and seeing where the trauma has affected me and trying to rebuild those bridges and build myself back up. I'm very good at introspection. So when I feel myself, so like I said, I have 3 kids, all under 5. They're all boys. They are destructive as fuck. Like, last night they were running around with golf clubs playing sword fights, and then one of them comes screaming because one has a bloody lip because they hit him in the face too hard. Like, it's chaos in my house. I'm good with it, because inside I'm still calm. One of my other things to do is like mindfulness. I learned a lot about mindfulness. Um, Washing dishes for me is huge. I try, like, my wife, I tell her, just, you can do some dishes, you just leave me some. Because when I wash the dishes, I focus on that mindfulness. I shut everything else out, and it's how the water feels on my fingertips, how the bubbles feel on my fingertips, how the bottle feels in my hand as I'm washing the kids' bottles, all that stuff. And it just brings me back to like a center thing. And I'm lucky to have my wife who's super supportive. When if I start to get stressed out, like, I can just look at her and be like, honey, I feel myself getting up there. Can I have just 5 minutes?
Mhm.
And I just take 5 minutes to just reset, just reset the day. Like, therapy has helped me out so much with that. And my work, like, because of my work, I do a lot of training that helps me look at myself too. So we have to learn all the multiple pathways of recovery. The only way I can read about the multiple pathways, like, I've read the Recovery Dharma, Smart Recovery, I've read all that stuff. But throughout the pandemic, like I said, my recovery world opened. Like, I'm going to Recovery Dharma meetings, I'm going to Smart Recovery meetings. Like, the only way I can learn how to do it is to do it for myself. So that when I meet somebody who, if I say, hey, the only way you can get clean and sober, you got to go to this 12-step meeting and you got to do exactly what they say. Like, I work in the corrections department. I tell them that, they're going to tell me, go get fucked. Like, they're, piss off. My job now is listening to somebody and figuring out, like, what pathway I think is going to be their biggest successful. And for me to know what pathway it is, I have to try them all. Like, that whole Jesus thing that I really tried, like, I did CR, like, I did that. And I really tried to do the 12 steps with Jesus and learn about it. And I just go open-minded, and I take what I learn on those bad days or those setbacks. Depression's still real. Man, my meds are amazing because they're really helpful. Because it's such a hard thing with depression, because you're like, hey, you're feeling depressed, you're anxious. How about you go on some meds that'll take 6 weeks to work? You're going to gain 50 pounds. You're not going to want to cry. You're not going to want to come. Like, you're not going to want to do shit. Like, you can't do anything. But here, it's going to help you with your depression, so you don't think about killing yourself. Like, in the beginning of the pandemic, like, that's when I started to do my med changes, because I came to my wife and I was like, I got to do something different. Like, I'm driving to work. This is when I work in the veterinary field. I'm driving to work and I'm picking out trees on the side of the road that would be good. Yeah, like, that I know aren't going to bend. Like, this one's not going to fucking bend.
Right.
Like, I got to do something. And it's that self-awareness from going through the 12 steps and being able to take it. I've done a lot of research on, like, the 12 steps, and I love everything they stand for. In the old days, there weren't all these meetings and stuff. The old days, you went to Ohio and you sat there and you learned the program in 2 weeks, and then you went back and carried it to the next suffering person. Like, you didn't get to go to a meeting every Wednesday or every Monday. Like, you had to figure out what to do, and that's where it is. Like, I didn't get sober to sit in a church basement every night of the week. Like, I got sober to help somebody, whether they're in recovery or not. Like, I can help the neighbor next door who can't go out and shovel their driveway. Like, I can go over there and help them shovel their driveway. And that makes me feel the exact same as me helping somebody find a meeting or, give someone direction. Like, it's just being a service is what I've come to do, and not just in recovery in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what I found really interesting is when you were talking about all these specific dates, kind of like big changes in your life. You got sober in March, you moved back in March, your aunt passed away in March, like a lot of things happened in March for you. And I just found that really interesting. And in the same breath, you're like, yeah, I don't believe in anything. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like
Exactly.
there's more that we're not seeing, but
March is a fucked up month for people.
It is. Amen. I shared with you that that's my sobriety date, and man, March is something else. But I just found that really interesting, and how you talk about not having a religion or a belief or whatever. I know you said that you didn't know anything about AA before you walked into the rooms, but while you're in it, how did you stay in it when you knew like half of it, the majority of it was about religion. You know what I mean? Like, how do you tell someone that won't go to AA or won't go to a 12-step meeting because of the talk of God?
Yeah. I didn't care. Like, you could have, like, literally at that point, you could have told me, like, the old thing, I have to believe in a flying spaghetti monster and I'll believe it, like, type of a thing. Like, I just didn't care. Like, you can say God, you can say whatever you want. I was very lucky to go to that first Sunday group and met some very wonderful people who did not once tell me I need to go to church, tell me I needed to go to communion or confession. They just said, these are the 12 steps. I remember I walked in, and about the second week, an old guy came up to me and he said, well, you've been coming around now for 2 weeks. Let's go. You and me, we're going to go do the steps. You're going to have them done before you're at your 90 days. And I was like, wait, like when I left treatment, my counselor said I didn't even have to find a home group for 60 days. Now you're telling me I have to do the steps when I'm 90. So he goes, yeah, this program isn't meant for you to sit complacent. Like, you need to get up and do work. Otherwise you're going to go back up and drink. So I think that's what saved me. I did the steps twice in my first 2 years. So I did it there and I did it at that retreat. And what I tell people now is there's so many other options than just 12 steps. So my job now, I don't even suggest a pathway of recovery until I talk to somebody at least 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So until I get to know them, I get to know what they're doing, what they're dealing with, I don't even suggest a pathway. I always say there's meetings. So in my area, we have peer support meetings that are non-denominational, non-program. It's just people struggling with substance use disorder that get together on Zoom and they meet 4 times a day. So I say there's these ones, you can go to these ones, or there's program-based ones. You tell me what you want to do. We're going to talk again in a couple of days. Think about it. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of plant that seed, and then it's getting to know people. Most people I work with know AA because they've been in jail or in prison and been to meetings. So it's not hard to sell them on it. When they get caught up on the God thing, I say, I went through it and you don't see me. I mean, yes, I have a shaved head, but I'm not out here preaching to everybody that walks through the door. I'm not, I didn't become a born again Christian or like evangelical about it. I just believe that there's something. I believe that there's some reason that we're all on this rock circling around this giant ball of fire more than just to die. Like, there's some other reason why we're on this ball of rock, and it's not to just sit here, suffer, and then die. Like, we have to make something of it. And that's where I found how to do it, was in 12 step those first 3 years. And I still do it. I still find it when I go there. Like, that's the one thing where I told my friend that invited me to the Ireland one, after the first one that I went to, I was like, I just felt like I was at home. Like, when you go back to wherever you called home, whether it be your parents' house or your grandparents, that feeling when you walk in that door, you take your shoes off, put your coat on, you sit down in the chair that you always sat down in, like that feeling like you belong there. I had that the minute I walked into that. And I still get it whenever I walk into a 12-step room. I don't schedule my days around a 12-step meeting like I had to the first 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And what I find with working with my coachees is there's multiple paths to recovery, but at any point, you don't have to be in a group or a 12-step program. You can be sober and stay sober doing day-to-day tasks, incorporating other things like you've mentioned, meditation, prayer of some kind to something else, or, journaling, or getting back into activities or exercise. We don't have to believe in a God. We don't have to go to programs. We don't have to, do 12 step to stay sober. And that's the fascinating part of it, because at least for me, when I first got sober, I was very narrow-minded. Right? It wasn't until I started working in a sober house and started coaching that, oh shit, you can stay sober, not doing all this other stuff. And that's where I, veered off and started doing my own thing, and I found comfort in that, and for me, walking into the 12-step program, I have no idea about God. I don't know shit about shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I'm just gonna be open and you guys fucking tell me what I gotta do. If I gotta get on my knees and fucking talk to someone or something, I'm gonna do it because I've done everything in my power to try to stay sober and it all failed. Hence why I'm here, right? So I'm gonna do all these suggestions and I might look fucking I look ridiculous while I do it. Whatever. If it's gonna keep me sober, if I'm gonna make it another day, then let's do it, you know?
Yep.
It's just being open and willing, right?
Yep. You gotta let go of some ideas because those ideas kept you sick. Like they just kept you like, okay. Like I remember I used to tell, like when my mom would tell me like someone was sick, I would be like, she'd be like, well, can you pray? I was like, Mom, I'm gonna go talk to a fucking tree out back and you go pray to God and see who answers it first. If she gets better, I'm saying the tree's my God. Like I used to be that standoffish about shit. And I just had to let that go. That was the whole 12-step thing is all about ego and breaking that ego and letting yourself become a part of something bigger than yourself, whether that's the group, whether that's a God, whether like if you go back to church and start reading the Bible and start doing Bible studies and start doing, dude, that is amazing. You are helping so many people and you are not only helping them, you are helping yourself. I'm not here to judge you for anything you do. Or if you just go to therapy, you get on different meds and all of a sudden you're better and you're not worried about drinking and you don't have a problem with drugs and you think you can handle it. All right, let's see what we can do. Let's start setting goals and see what we can do this way. I said, but if it becomes a problem, then we talk about what we can add to it. That's the beauty of what kind of like we do in our like coaching field is we get to be there and catch them before they go all the way to the bottom. Like we get to set that goal and be like, all right, so you tried doing marijuana and then all of a sudden you were like, you went from smoking it 1 day a week to relax. Now you're smoking it 5 days a week, but now you're doing Xannies on top of it. Remember when we talked 2 months ago that if you started doing Xannies, we were going to have to discuss maybe cutting back on marijuana and trying a different approach. And like we get to be there for that. And they're like, shit, I did write that because I signed that, didn't I? I was like, yep, that's your signature. What are we going to do now?
Right. So how did you get into coaching?
Pandemic. And I really was getting burnt out working in the veterinary field. Like there's a reason why that field has such a high addiction, such a high suicide rate. Like it is a thankless job. I mean, you make absolutely nothing. Everybody thinks that we're all, like being a doctor and everything, you're rich. You're not. You make absolutely nothing, but the clients all think that you're trying to upsell them so that you can get the nice car and stuff, when really all you care about is like you want to see their dog live another 2 years and you're trying to get them on a medication. Like it is extremely thankless. You're there from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. Like my wife, her last job before she quit, she would go in at 8 a.m. She'd come home after the kids went to bed. So she'd be home about 8:30 at night. And then she'd eat dinner real quick. And then she'd be doing her charts and stuff till 2:30 in the morning. And then she'd do it all over again. And she's doing that 5 or 6 days a week. Like there's a reason why. And going to therapy and everything, I realized like it wasn't enough. Like it wasn't worth it for me doing that. I was getting way more agitated at home. I wasn't having time for the kids. I wasn't being my best self. And I always enjoyed working with people in recovery. I enjoyed the sponsorship. I enjoyed sponsoring people. And I enjoyed helping people. Like I've always been a helper. Like I said, like I worked on an ambulance. I was an EMT. I did all that stuff. I always liked helping people. So I figured like, what can I do? Like my first goal was like, I want to be a counselor. Mm-hmm. So I was like, what can I do? And I was like, well, I can do this training. It's a week long. And then I can see what I can do from there and kind of keep growing. And then once I did that training, I got a job working for a nonprofit here where we help homeless veterans, things like that. And I realized like, this is what I want to do. Like I can go on and do my counselor and do all that stuff too. I can get those, the initials at the end of my name. I'm working towards all that, but I don't know if I ever want to work as that. I want to, because counselor, it just becomes too like one side of the couch and then the other person's taking notes. Like coaching is just personable. It's there. And that's how I got into it. Was literally I heard about it on a podcast and I was like, oh, let me see what this is about. And I started looking and I found a place and they hired me and they trained me. And now it's what I do full time, 40 hours a week.
Wow, that's impressive. Have you ever worked with a coach yourself, or you just heard it from the podcast?
Nope, just heard it. I heard it mentioned. It was either on a podcast or I heard it going through my therapy, maybe, because they were starting to have coaches, but I don't even think they had coaches like 5 years ago when I was coming out. I know my rehab didn't have any. So I never worked with one, never even heard of one. I thought it was goofy that they were called coaches and stuff, but like, yeah, I just, no.
Now, how can someone, if I wanted you to be my coach, do I have to be involved with PMP as like?
So, yeah. So right now, my job right now is, it's pretty cool because I'm working for Department of Corrections as a recovery coach in Michigan. Department of Correction, I'm a contractor through them. I work with probation and parole, and that's the majority of the people. That's like the only people I see that I get paid to see. I was the very first one to be hired in the state. We're up to 6 coaches now in 3 different counties. And I'm pretty sure there might be one other state that's just starting to do this, but we were like the first one. And it's pretty cool to be like the tip of the sword going through into the battle, like that first one. Because before we started, so now there's me and one other coach in my county. Before we started, like if there was a positive drug test or if someone needed help or things like that, they had to go through so many different layers. Or if they had a drug test, it was boom, you're going to jail for 10 days. Now, through not only us being there, but like us educating different agents and things like that. Because I'm not an agent. I don't report to agents. I don't report to anybody in that building. I report to somebody that's at the state level. None of the agents see anything. Like everything that I talk to about people is just me and them. And being able to help people and build this program. So now if someone tests positive, they don't get to go back. They don't have to go back to jail. Like they get to come talk to me or the other coach, and we get to build a relationship and work on recovery and our positive drug screens. So the program started in April of last year. And I think right now I've had like 38 guys so far. I've only had 3 that have actually gone back and committed more crimes and had to go back to jail. And I've only had 2 that I was actively working with that had positive drug screens. But they didn't even have positive drug screen because they were working with me. They told me that they had a slip up. We discussed a plan, what we were going to do, what they were going to add to it. We had them write it out, sign it, and him and I went to the agent on the drug screen day and said, before the test was even done, like, I'm big on the accountability. And he took this plan. He said, hey, I screwed up a week ago. This is what I talked about. Me and him have been talking for a week. This is what we're going to do. And the agent's like, all right, go ahead, go do it. And like people go to treatment, people do this. Like it's pretty cool, especially in Michigan. Like Michigan, I don't know many other states that in prison, they're doing like MAT. Like prisoners are getting their Suboxone, like, so that they're getting all that stuff. It's pretty amazing to see the change from 5 years ago. Like it was just like, no, you go sweat and shit on a cot. Like you do what you got to do. Like, but now to be there and to be compassionate is a huge thing.
Do your coaches take it seriously, or do you have some that are like, I just got to do it to get by type of deal?
Yeah. A lot of it is I just got to do it to get by. Like I got 3 years left and I just got to do it to get by. I'm like, all right, let's do it to get by. Like I don't judge my success if somebody stays clean for the rest of their life. Like my success is if that person smiles, doesn't go back, and is living a happy, full life, regardless if they're using substances or not. Because I mean, there's such a long scale of like severe, that Skid Row where we're down in the bottom to somebody that can maybe have a drink, but they can have a couple of drinks but they can't use heroin. So there's such a big difference. Like me, I know if I was to start smoking pot again, like I do it every single day. Like there would be no shut off for me. Same with drinking, or same with pills. Like if anybody gave me a pill, like boom, I'd be going right back out. Like there is no shut off for me. I cannot, even now, like even I do, so I'm big on, like at night, my relaxing thing is I read a book and I drink some tea. So it's either like chamomile tea, ashwagandha tea, like those relaxing ones. And all the way from rehab, like I can't just put one tea packet in. It's not strong enough. I got to put two in. Like that person that I have to have two packets of tea. One's never enough for me, even with tea.
Right.
Like that's just how I am. But yeah, I don't judge my success as a recovery coach on if people find recovery or not. Judge my success on if I help them just a little bit.
Yeah. You can't put your success in that, because then you're taking that home with you. You're putting way too much pressure on yourself, and that's not fair for yourself. You're going to do what you can, and if they're going to take it or leave it, right? Hopefully they take it, because if they see how successful you have been in your recovery, they can see that it's better on the other side. There's freedom on the other side, physically and mentally. I don't know. For me, I've never worked with a coach, excuse me. I only am working with coaches, and it has opened up a lot of doors. Just understanding people in a different way, understanding recovery in a different way. And it really helps me evolve as a person, right? And then actually seeing those people have success, or just even a little bit of success, is makes me feel so good.
Yes. And I like what you said. Like I don't take credit for the good things that happen people that I work with lives, because if I take credit for that, like I have to take credit for the ones that don't make it. So like my previous job where I worked with like the homeless, and those were people that were on that severe end of, and most of them, like I've lost so many of them to ODs and stuff. And if I take credit for the one guy that gets a year, I have to take credit for the 5 guys that died. Like, and that's too much to put on my shoulders. So that's where that 12-step higher power, like that's where that guidance, I'm only here to be like a voice and to try and get somebody to lessen a little bit. And when it comes down to it, is I'm just here to be compassionate. Like we don't pick up a drug or an alcohol. Like I haven't met one person that I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds so far, that just said, oh, hey, everything's going great. I'm going to stick this needle in my arm and I'm going to make it better. Like everybody has some sort of trauma. Everybody has something that screwed them up. Like most of my guys now, like they just get out of prison for 30 years and they just like, of course, why wouldn't you? Like, I get that. I would want to go do a line right now if I just got out for 30 years, but I'm here to tell you, like, if you keep going positive, you're going to end up back there. So what can we do to get you off this for the next 5 years and help you do this? Like, I'm not here to make you do this for the rest of your life. Like, I completely get that you want to go do that line. Like, if I was you, I'd want to go do that line. It's just, it's building that. Like, the one guy that comes to my mind is him and we talked for about 4 weeks, once a week. And I just kept talking to him. We just talked about, what he wanted to do, like what type of goals he had, what he wanted to do, kind of what worked for him before, because he had 5 years before and this and that. And on like the 5th time that I met with him, I was like, hey, there's this CR meeting that meets tonight. Why don't you go to that and see if that fits you? Now, if on that first meeting, if I would have said, hey, here's Celebrate Recovery, here's 12-step, here's Recovery Dharma, pick one, go to it, I would have shut him off and I would have never seen him again. But because I waited and I listened to his story and what he wanted to say to somebody, and actually listened as a person that's been through not what he's done exactly the same, but walk that same path, I was able to say, why don't you go try this and just see? And I mean, like, he's got a mentor in that program now. He's working the steps in that program now. Like, he's doing amazing in that. And it's just listening. Mm-hmm. Like 95% of my job is listening. Yep. That's it. And the other 5% is just answering the phone and picking up when people call.
Mm-hmm. Providing them with resources.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know how many times I've met with somebody who did not talk once about a substance, but it's more about finding them a place to live because they're living in a shelter, or signing them up for health insurance so that they can go see a psychiatrist and get back on their medications, or getting them clothes, or getting them food. Like, how many majority of my times I've spent with people are doing those 5 things. And then the substance use doesn't even come in, because I'm not going to address the substance use because you don't even have a roof over your head. Like, let's talk about getting you someplace safe where you can heal. Like, that's the whole thing, is getting someplace safe where you have time to heal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we covered a lot. Like, I could keep talking about it, but I got some rapid fire questions that I want to ask you. And so I think that would be a great way to just kind of wrap it up and maybe, tackle a little bit more some other time. How's that feel?
That works. Let's do it.
All right. So, what makes you happy?
My kids.
Who's your biggest influence?
Oh, my biggest influence. I say that changes a lot, but right now I'm doing a lot of like Gabor Mate reading. So I'm reading a lot about trauma and addiction. So I would say like he's influencing me a lot right now.
Who is that? I've never heard of him.
Oh, he's he's like a Hungarian doctor. He worked up in Vancouver. He's deals with addiction and stuff. He wrote In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is a big like addiction textbook about it, and about meeting people where they're at in trauma. Like, he was one of the big guys that come up and say like what trauma is. So I've been doing a lot of his reading. But that, and like all the podcasts I listen to, like that's been my recovery too. Like yours, Dopey, Church and Other Drugs, like different. There's even like therapy ones where they tackle different, like depression one week and what people are doing. Like, I listen to all these podcasts because I have time during the day. Like, I'll plug it in and while I'm driving, and those influence me so much more.
Yep, definitely. What's one affirmation that you wish you told yourself more often?
I'm doing just fine.
Mm.
Because even now I have that negative self-talk where I'm not doing enough, or I'm not doing it well enough.
I like it. And if you could give one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just be open. Be open to someone else's experience.
That was definitely something you mentioned a lot in today, and I love it. I mean, it's on point, right? It's perfect advice. I love it. All right, last one. What's something you want to accomplish?
I'd like to get my counseling certificate, so I have that option. That's be like the next thing. I want to open a recovery house, like all inclusive, MAT, all that stuff, recovery house, but that's probably 10 years away. But the next one's getting that counseling certificate.
What's stopping you from taking that first step or the next step?
Schooling, just figuring out schooling with the young kids and with work and all that fun stuff.
I hear it. Life gets a little busy.
It does. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time being on this podcast. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's, I enjoy it, and anything I can do to kind of break out of that anonymous role and, show people that we can recover. And, I do it out loud. Like, there's nowhere I go we go on vacations and I wear sober life shirts or things like that, because you never know who you're going to pass that's struggling and thinks that they have to hide it. And you never know who you're going to touch.
Exactly. And that's why I started this podcast. There's no need to be recovering in the quiet. Okay. So lastly, where can we find you?
Yeah. So I'm not on Facebook anymore. That's kind of for the older generation, I feel now. I wasn't a big fan of Facebook. I'm on Instagram at Recovery Mike. I love Instagram because I can shut people out that I don't need to hear in my life. It's more better for my mental wealth.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yep. So that's there. And honestly, if anybody's struggling, they can reach out on there. I do free coaching. Like, I'll talk to you. I'll like, just hit me up. Like, that's why I got in recovery, is to help the next person. So if someone's struggling, like, shoot me a message. Let's figure out something that can make you suffer just a little bit less.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. Thanks for leaving that with us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Of course. All right. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.